Okay, so let's get started. As I mentioned when we were outside, we've got a change of content here with some other people, and one of the beauties of CNP is we have so many members who are right in the heart of the battle that we face, and we're going to hear from them this morning. We've got Bob McEwen leading the panel, and we also have him joining Rachel Bovard, Adam Brandon, and Ralph Reed, and Bob will do those introductions. Before we do that, though, I'd like to recognize some new members that are in the room, or I hope in the room. Rob and Diane Gluskin. There you go. Rob and Jeannie Hillerides. Welcome. Jack and Arlene Jackson. Guys. Mark Little. Okay. Rick Manning. There you are, Rick. William and Lisa Morgan. Linda Payne. Guys, welcome, guys. John and Chrissy Shue. Mark Smith. Hey. And Steve Verlay. What do we say? Needs no further introduction. Bob McEwen. And with that,
thank you.
Go get him, Bob.
All righty. Thank you, Bill. The Gold Circle Board of Governors Luncheon is designed that we all get together and have a little private time together, but it's getting to the point where we can't all fit in one spot. So what happened was we had to just go outside. It was the only place I could seat us, and then we come here. And we're glad that you're here. We're going to talk about a couple of things for about 5 or 10 minutes apiece, and then we'll go to questions and answers, so make sure that you have them. Let me introduce everybody. Rachel Bovard is the policy advisor for the Conservative Partnership Institute, CPI, and senior advisor on the Internet Accountability Project. She co-authored with Senator Jim DeMint, Conservative, Knowing What to Keep, which came out this past fall. In addition to her public policy pursuits, Rachel is an accomplished sommelier. But she works with Jim DeMint, member of our board, and is well respected, one of the greatest senators ever from South Carolina. Adam Brandon is president of FreedomWorks. He's the boss, a grassroots service of millions of activists who support smaller government, lower taxes, free markets, personal liberty, rule of law. He and his wife Jacqueline live in Washington, D.C. And then Ralph Reed is the founder and chairman of Faith Freedom Coalition, as well as chairman and CEO of Century Strategies. You remember some years ago when the movement began to take shape, he was the founder and president of the Christian Coalition, and began the activation that all of us are benefiting from. So Ralph and his wife Joanne have 4 children. 1 grandchild reside in Atlanta. So what we wanted you all to do when we have this unique opportunity is the Conservative Action Project is a division of CNP that meets every Wednesday morning for the purpose of seeing what needs to be done and acting immediately. And one of the things that they do is that you see some folks that are not supportive of our cause, but they get the swamp to support them to a key position. And so the conservatives get together and send a message. We have a representative from the president every week. In fact, the president got tired of everybody coming to our meetings. So now we meet at the White House one week a month for the purpose of helping him in the goal. So when legislation is stymied or when something needs to be done, as you're going to hear testimony here in just a few moments, that's what we do. And we wanted you to be aware of that and then be able to ask any questions that you have. So Rachel, Adam, and Ralph, if you'll come forward. Rachel, ladies first. Ladies. You sit either way. I'll sit back here. You get to go first, Rachel.
Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So I think we want to talk about it, sort of what the conservative movement is doing in DC. And it's a pretty exciting time. So a little bit about my background. I came to DC 14 years ago. I then spent 10 years on Capitol Hill working in various capacities in the House and the Senate, and I've spent the last 4 years working off the Hill in the movement. And I have to say, and I think these guys will probably agree, the conservative movement has never been more dynamic or effective than it is right now under President Trump. And I think that's hugely, hugely exciting for us. So a little bit about my role in that. So Bob mentioned I'm the policy director at the Conservative Partnership Institute, and we work a lot to coordinate the conservative movement generally with the White House. And this administration has done tremendous work with conservatives, and they've also, I think most importantly, been responsive to the conservative movement. And this is where the Conservative Action Project really comes in. As Bob said, we meet every Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning, which is both like the best and the worst time to have a meeting, right? Because it's 7:30 in the morning, but it's also no one has an excuse because they're not doing anything at 7:30 in the morning, so attendance is usually pretty good. But what we do there, as Bob mentioned, we hear from the Trump administration, officials will come talk to us, but we also try to really have their back when they're doing the right thing, which is the first goal. And the second goal is to also set the benchmark for where the conservative movement is and really push the administration to meet that goal. And that's been very important for us. Just a couple of issues where we've been really impactful that I want to highlight. The first was most recently on impeachment. The conservative movement really rallied behind the administration. We worked a lot to coordinate messaging in the movement. And to that end, Jenny Beth Martin, I think, is here somewhere. I saw her. Yeah. So Jenny Beth worked really aggressively. I think she was a leader on this issue to bring the members of the House and the Senate together with the conservative movement to say, okay, what is our coordinated messaging going to be? You know, what is coming up? What is it that we need to focus on and amplify? And so we hosted those meetings at our offices at CPI. And then we also hosted Senator Ted Cruz ran his impeachment war room out of the basement at CPI. And you may be familiar with the podcast that he put together called The Verdict, which since it came out went to #1. Like it went ahead of Ben Shapiro. It went ahead of all these other podcasts because he was communicating to the base, right? He was communicating to all of us, telling us what was happening that day, you know, making the argument, and all of that was run out of the basement at CPI. So that is what we try to do, is try to get members of Congress and the movement on the same page to help where we can. So that was really important strategy on impeachment. But at CAP, we also really seek to support the members of the administration that are doing the right thing. Because as you guys, I don't have to tell you how the slings and arrows that come at conservatives who are actually standing up to do what's right. And so we write memos that support these guys. I was looking through, all the memos are on conservativeactionproject.com, but I was looking just this morning, the list of people that we've supported who are trying to do the right thing are names that you may not be familiar with because they're not seeking the spotlight, right? They're just trying to do the right thing. The left puts them out in the spotlight and says, these people are terrible. And as conservatives, we need to support our guys. We don't leave them on the field, right? We get out there and we fight for them. So just recently, we were supportive of Mark Paoletta, who is the general counsel at the Office of Management and Budget, who was primarily responsible for making the legal argument that allowed President Trump to move funding from the DOD to build his wall. Okay, huge, huge Trump victory, and the left wants to demonize him. Never Trumpers want to demonize him. Conservatives say, hey, we have the smartest, most intelligent lawyer on our side. We're going to support him. Russ Vogt, who is the acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, familiar to many of you. He used to be at Heritage Action for America. He's been a conservative warrior and a mentor of mine, actually, for many years. He's someone that's taken a lot of heat. We want to support him when he's doing the right thing. Ken Cuccinelli, also probably familiar to many of you, acting director at USCIS. He's really leading the charge to implement Trump's agenda on immigration. You can imagine how much the left hates him. But fortunately, if you know Ken, you know that just like makes him stronger. But we want to know that we want him to know that we have his back. Michael Pack, who's been nominated to the Broadcasting Board of Governors. You probably, if you saw Created Equal, the Clarence Thomas documentary, Michael Pack was primarily responsible for that. Guess why the left hates him? Yeah. Okay, so we want him to know that we support him as well. And then Eugene Scalia at Department of Labor, a huge, huge advocate for conservative views. And so we were supportive of him. And then even judges who have been subject to ridiculous smears by the left. Lawrence Van Dyke, a judge, Kelly Shackelford probably tell me where he is. I forget Ninth Circuit. So he was faced with just awful attacks by the American Bar Association, who has basically beclowned themselves as, they used to say they were neutral. They're clearly not. And so we were standing up to support him. Same with Sarah Pitlick, who is a pro-life woman judge. She's now in the mix, and she was subject to a bunch of distortions and smears by the left. We wrote in support of her as well. So this is just a handful of people that we really support trying to do the right thing. And the last thing I'll say on that is, a huge area for a lot of movement conservatives in D.C. is the staffing in President Trump's administration. We have a ton of conservatives serving there, but we need more. And we work very closely, CAP does, and then we at CPI also, with the Office of Presidential Personnel at the White House to try and get good conservatives in these positions, because we see what happens when we don't vet these people. That's how we got Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, okay? That's how we got Marie Yovanovitch. All these people that led the impeachment against President Trump shouldn't have been there in the first place. We want to prevent that from happening. And so to that end, at CPI, we work very closely with PPO. But also, you may have seen recently, I know Rick Manning's here somewhere. I saw him. So there's a group of us that meet with Ginny Thomas every week at the Groundswell meeting. And Ginny has been very instrumental in working with the White House on this. You've seen her come under some attack recently. The left loves to attack Ginny Thomas, but I will say she is one of the most powerful and fierce women in Washington, and she's a role model for us younger conservatives. And so if you happen to see her, I know many of you are probably her friends, tell her thank you, because she is really the tip of the spear of these efforts. So I just gave you a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I'm sure we'll have time for questions, but I want to turn it over to y'all as well.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
Adam?
All right. First of all, I was on the plane out here when I got a text saying, "Hey, unfortunately, Art can't make it. Can you join on stage?" So while I was doing that, I was actually reading the culmination of a poll that we were doing for the last 6 months on the House races. So that's what I wanted to kind of talk to you about, is like what we're looking at in 2020. So the first question I want to have, I spoke to probably most of you in 2018, and I asked how many of you were optimistic about our chances. And almost no one raised their hands before the election. This was the midterms. How many of you are optimistic about 2020 now? This is the energy that we are starting to get a sense of out in the field. But I'll warn you, we haven't won anything yet. We haven't won a thing. So first, just to build on something that Rachel was talking about, that I'm pleased to be a member of CAP and CNP, is that there's a lot of in DC inside. A lot of inside. And what does the inside tend to do to influence? Television ads, right? Probably your least effective medium to communicate now. Your strongest is peer-to-peer. So going back to the impeachment wars and what we were able to do, again, we didn't have, Jenny Beth volunteered to take the lead on getting people organized. My organization does a lot on social media, so we volunteered to take the lead on social media. Other people, we kind of divided it out. And what's really important that I'm noticing about this is that we're starting this, like, working together is something new. And that's something unique about this organization is, yes, it's inside, but it's connections to real people on the outside. And I think that's what makes a huge difference, because the left coordinates, folks. If you haven't realized this, when we show up for a tax battle, it's every other global warming and this rights group. They all show up together. So it's so important for us to figure out ways that we do what we do well and get together. So let me get into some of this about what we're seeing about the House. All this data is coming from Scott Rasmussen, if you're familiar with Scott. And we've been in the field now for about 6 months. And we're going to work on the presidential race at FreedomWorks. We're going to work on some Senate races, but really the House has been our main focus. So you can't stop impeachment really until you get the House back, because even if Trump gets reelected, he's going to get impeached again and again and again until you get the House back. To get policy victories, you're going to need to get the House back. To win the House, you need to win in the suburbs. Period. Here's just what's interesting. If you look at the data, Donald Trump does not need the suburbs to win. His modeling does not need the suburbs. But if you want the House, you've got to win in the suburbs. So what does that mean? On election day, and so in Q&A, if you want more data on what that looks like, ask away. State of play. On election day, we're going to be down 45 seats. Okay? Yeah. We need to flip 25 because we're going to lose a couple. There's a few races we're going to lose. Okay? But you need to win 25. The good news, there are 30 Democrats in districts that Donald Trump won. Those should be the easiest to get back. Okay, now we're getting optimistic. Here's the other side. You need you need at least 2 to 3 seats in Iowa. 2 to 3 seats in Upper New York State is going to be very important, and about 3 seats in California. If you don't win 3 in California and 2 or 3 in New York, there's no chance you're getting the majority back. Okay? So here's the issues. This is when we tested with likely voters. Number 1 issue is the issue we lost on in 2018, and that is health care. Their number 1 issue. Number 2, immigration. What are they looking for in immigration? A rules-based system. That's what they're looking for. They don't like the open border, but they like immigration. Number 3, the economy. If you want a job, you can get a job. That's what they like about the economy. Stay away from numbers. And number 4, national security. It's a dangerous world. The good news is we're winning on 3 out of 4 of those issues. The bad news is healthcare, we are losing. So one of my things I'd like to leave here with everyone is if we're going to work together, we cannot put our head in the sand on healthcare if we're going to win the House back. Actually, Donald Trump could win without talking about healthcare. You will not win the House if you don't start talking about healthcare. So the other 2 issues I'm looking for the Democrats to exploit. Child care is going to be something I think that they're going to start moving on, and retirement security, expanding Social Security benefits, just free money, free child care, free. If you don't have answers, I think those 2 issues look to be the pre-existing conditions issue that took us down in 2018. So another group I just wanted to mention is the non-voters in these areas. So that first group are the people who are likely to vote. This next group is something we call the movable middle. They did not vote. They sometimes vote. They're 59% independent, 21% leaning to the GOP. That means like 80% of these traditional non-voters are people we could get. So all you hear about Bernie Sanders getting the young vote, these are the folks we need to go and get. And they're fascinating. They don't like Democrats or Republicans. They do not listen to the news. They only respond to positive messages. They tend to be non-college educated white folks. But if they vote 65% GOP. So if you turn these folks out, you're probably going to be turning it. And guess what their number 1 issue to get them to turn out to vote is? It's their civic duty. That's what appeals to them. And the reasoning is they believe if their self-interests aligns with their neighbor's self-interests, and that's a civic duty to vote, then they turn out. It's not heavy. By the way, this is not heavy on specific issues. So with that, I think I talked a little too much. I would love to get in. I love numbers. My master's degree is in finance. I don't know how I ended up in politics, but with that, I just want to say we can take the House back, folks. But we are going to have to address health care, and we're going to have to win probably 10 suburban districts across the country.
Thank you, Adam. My degree is in finance as well. So just before Ralph, think of any questions that you might have, and we'll immediately jump to questions thereafter. So Ralph Reed.
Mine's in history, and I'm not teaching in the classroom. So I guess we all ended up here one way or the other. What I'd like to do with my time is focus a little bit on the presidential race. Just talk a little. I don't want to. Mark Louder with the Trump campaign is here. I don't know exactly when he's speaking.
He's up next.
Okay, well, I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I'll just talk a little bit about the macro political environment. And then I want to focus on the faith vote and how critical it is to turn out in the largest numbers we've ever seen in American history. The president, prior to this coronavirus speed bump that we've seen in the last week or two, was extremely well positioned for re-election. Not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but if you look at the Gallup poll, he was at 49% in his job approval. He was at the highest level he had ever been recorded in the Wall Street Journal NBC News poll. The Real Clear Politics average, he was at 46.4% on Monday. That was before this correction in the stock market. He's now at 45.7, and there's downward pressure on that job approval. The single most predictive data point in the re-election campaign of an incumbent president as to whether they win or not is their job approval. Just to give you a little bit of comparison, on this date in 2012, Barack Obama's job approval was 45%. On this date in 2004, George W. Bush's job approval was 49%, right where Trump's is. Reagan's was 55%. He went on to carry 49 states. Now, I think the most interesting thing for the Trump campaign and for us as conservatives to do to move that needle is the delta between the president's overall job approval and his economic job approval. In the Gallup, his economic job approval was 63%. That's going to fall with this stock market correction. Let's hope that they stay in front of the coronavirus. Let's hope this is a short-term and not a long-term pressure on the reelect. I'm not an economist, and I don't really pay much attention to what they predict anyway, but JP Morgan is assessing that the first quarter growth for China in 2020 is going to fall from a projected 15% to a negative 4%. That's going to impact global economic growth. It's going to affect us. Now, why is this important? It all goes back to the sign that hung in the Clinton campaign headquarters in Little Rock in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. There have been 17 times in the last 100 years that an incumbent president stood for re-election. In 11 of those 17 campaigns, there had not been a recession in the prior 24 months. So, think of Reagan 84, think of Obama 2012, think of Clinton 96. Okay, there are 11 of those. In those re-elects, those incumbents, even if they had not been elected themselves, this includes Lyndon Johnson in 64, it includes Harry Truman in 48. If there is not a negative growth for 2 quarters or more in the 24 months prior to that re-elect, they're 11 for 11. There are 6 where there was a recessionary pattern in the 24 months prior to the re-elect. We all know who those are. That's Carter in 1980. It's George H.W. Bush in 1992. There are 6 of those where you had a recessionary development. 5 out of the 6 lost. So that's the most important thing. So we got to get past this coronavirus. The good news is the economy's strong. It's unlikely that we're going to have a recession. If we don't and we do our job, historically, he should be reelected. Now, let me get to that job. As you know, in 2016, Donald Trump won the highest share of the self-identified evangelical vote ever recorded. He won 81% of that vote. Hillary Clinton won only 16%. That's the lowest share ever won by a Democratic candidate for president, even lower than Michael Dukakis in 1988. It takes a lot to pull that off, but she did it. And there are a lot of reasons why. The basket of deplorables. You remember the third debate when Chris Wallace asked, very few people remember this, it was the opening question in the debate about the Supreme Court and the life issue and the gun issue. And when she blew off Chris Wallace's question on her Senate vote on late-term pain-capable abortion, Donald Trump turned to her and said, that means you would allow the baby to be ripped from its womb moments before it's born, its mother's womb. Now, you may be okay with that. I am not okay with that. I believe he won the election at that moment. The rest of the evangelicals came home. On that day, he was losing the Catholic vote. He went on to win the Catholic vote 52 to 45%. He won the white Catholic vote 58 to 42%. And he won the frequently attending, that means once a week or more often, frequently mass attending Catholics, he won them 2 to 1. Okay? Now, I believe he can go higher on all of those. And the reason for that is look at what happened in 2018. In 2018, in spite of all the things they did to turn their vote out, In Florida, where you had a governor's race that was tied and you had a Senate race that was tied, the evangelical vote went from 21% of the electorate in 2014 to 29% of the electorate in 2018. They voted 80-20 for Ron DeSantis and for Rick Scott, and they both won races that were on the knife's edge. In my home state of Georgia, Stacey Abrams outspent the Republican candidate for governor, Brian Kemp, 2-1, $50 million to $25 million. By the way, Mike Bloomberg just wrote her a $5 million check, and that's just the opening bid. What she did in Georgia, she's going to be doing in every battleground state. But the evangelical vote in Georgia went from 32 to 36%, and get this, they voted 88% for Brian Kemp and only 11% for her. Now, I personally want to talk to that 11%. But the point is, this vote is bigger than the African American, the Hispanic, and the union vote combined. It's 27% of the electorate in 2016. If we can do in 20 what we did in 18, and by the way, we had a net increase, raw vote total, we had a net increase of 10.3 million evangelical voters in 18 over 14. Now, there were some in-cycle specific reasons for that. For example, there was no critical Senate race in Texas in 14. In 18, you had Beto, Robert Francis O'Rourke running against Ted. Okay, so there were some reasons. But this president, and you know this, has fired these people up and been their champion unlike you have ever seen. Now, if you take that 27% of the electorate and you take it like a pie and cut it out of the electorate and set it to the side, the remaining 73% of the electorate voted 68 to 32% for Hillary Clinton. This is the whole key. And so our goal at Faith and Freedom, just what we're doing, we built a database of 41.6 million center-right evangelical voters. We don't know yet because we've got to do the data work, but we're estimating that between 22 and 24 million of those will be in the states that will decide the election. Not just the presidential election, but Senate states like Colorado, New Hampshire, Maine, Arizona. We certainly hope not Alabama. We hope that gets done in the primary. But if we can increase their turnout from the 27% of the electorate in 16 to 30% or so, and if we can move the needle on his vote from 81 to 85 or 86%, and if we can do the same with the Catholic vote, it is over as long as he can keep the loss among women to where it was in 16, which was 13 points. The other strategic imperative, which is also an important part of the faith vote, is the Hispanic and the African American vote. He got 29% of that vote 4 years ago. If he can get it to 35, 33 to 35, he got 35% of the Hispanic vote in Florida. We think he can get 45% of that vote. If it's Bernie Sanders and he's running around saying Fidel Castro made sure that everybody in Cuba could read and write, and if the president is doing what he's doing on Venezuela and other issues, we can see that vote go from 29 to 35 nationally, and we can see it go from the 35% that he got in Florida to 45%. Let me say this about the African American vote. It depends on who they nominate, and it depends on whether or not they put an African American on the ticket. I think there's a virtual 90% certainty, if it's Bloomberg, Biden, Buttigieg, or Sanders, that they're going to put a person of color on that ticket. Because think about this for a minute. They lost Pennsylvania by 44,279 votes. And there were 56,000 fewer African American votes in South Philly in 16 than there were in 12. They lost Michigan by 10,704 votes. There were 29,000 fewer African American votes in Wayne County, Detroit, than there were 4 years earlier. They lost Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. There were 47,000 fewer African American votes cast in Milwaukee County alone than there were in 2012. If we know that, they know that. So with that as the caveat, he has the ability to go from where he was, which was 8%, to 11, 12, 13, I even think 15%, based on criminal justice reform, jobs, school choice, and other things that he's doing. These are the key things that we have to do. Move the needle among Hispanics, move it among African Americans, raise white evangelicals from 27 to 30%, get that margin from 81 to 85 or 86, and don't lose women by more than 13. If we do that, we're not going to be up until 2:30 in the morning this time. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Actually, my first question for Ralph is, how do you do all that without notes?
I know. Amateurs.
Richard.
Adam, the numbers guy.
Yeah. Well, there has to have paper, obviously.
So I think we might be sitting in one of those 3 congressional districts in California, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to know your thoughts about this district, and also where are the other 2 in California?
Well, it's funny. I think I travel too much when you said we're in California, and I'm thinking, are we in California? I put on 230,000 air miles last year, but it's when we're looking at we're trying to build up a map right now of like what it would look like if you win. We're about a week away in the analysis. It's just it comes back when you start moving the crayons around. You got to pick up 2 or 3 in New York. You got to pick up at least 3 out here. But yes, it is these more inland empire districts, and a lot of what Ralph was saying marries up perfectly to some of the data that we're seeing. Remember, I said Trump doesn't need the suburbs. It's those folks that are turning out. When you look at Pennsylvania, what happened? Trump did worse than Romney in Philadelphia, much worse. But he did so much better in the middle of the state. And so that's what would catapult him. So, but going back specifically here, yes, you need to find 2 or 3 of these districts here in California that you lost. There's about 5 competitive districts. You've got to win 3. I'm not prepared to say which ones we're ready to focus on right now, but if you're going to win the majority back, and these issues that I mentioned, healthcare, immigration, economy, national security, they are the same of likely voters in suburban districts. It's the same across the country.
Trey. EW.
Adam, Ralph, E.W. Jackson, Stan, both of you kind of alluded to it but didn't mention socialism by label. So my question is, to what extent is our ability to brand the Democrat Party as a socialist party going to impact the voters who we need to turn out in 2020? Those numbers that you said need to go up. Will that have any impact on the black vote, any impact on the evangelical vote? I mean, I speculate that it would, but you guys seem to know what the numbers are doing.
Yes, it will. It'll have a huge impact, and I'd have to go back and look at the specific polling. And I certainly don't want to speak for the campaign. Mark will do that after this session. But they are of the view that if you can turn this into a socialism versus free markets and capitalism, a communistic, socialistic plan for the country versus free market, it basically ends up breaking sort of high 50s to low 40s in terms of where the American people are. And so it does work. And here's why it works so critically among people of faith. Because they understand that in the end, freedom is indivisible. Okay, if you go to Venezuela, or you go to Cuba, or you go to some of these other socialistic countries, it's not as if they take your economic freedom away, but you get to keep your religious liberty. You don't. If someone is controlling and planning the economy, they're also going to be doing everything that they can to crush the church. And if you don't believe me, just look at what happened under Obama. If you think there's a difference between the stimulus plan and Obamacare and the BOLO list at the IRS and the attempt to sue the Little Sisters of the Poor and sue into oblivion Hobby Lobby and other private sector employers of faith, then you just don't know your history. So yes, it will help a lot. Whether we get it or not, I don't know, but it needs a big part of our top-line messaging.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak a little bit about that, too, because I do think everything Ralph's saying is right, but where I think the social message fails is with the youth vote.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a big risk for Republicans going forward. And if you look at how the Bernie wins the young voters, basically. And the reason is our public education system has failed, right? Because they all don't understand that socialism is actually evil, right, inherently. A lot of them think if you look at the polling, it means social media. I'm not making this up. So, but honestly, we're reaping what we've sown, right? The public education system has given us this. Our universities have been lost. And this is why we're seeing this. And so I do think it's incumbent upon the right to address this substantively, right? We can wave a lot of socialism sucks banners, but it's not going to win it in the end because they don't find that compelling. Where I think we have to meet them on the field. We have to demonstrate politically how socialism fails. We have to demonstrate how it's against human dignity. We have to talk about policies that where capitalism has worked. And you have to understand, and I've written a lot about this, I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial now, but I'm a millennial. Our generation has seen a lot of crony capitalism, folks. We really have. And so it hasn't given us a lot to believe in. I came of age politically my first job on Capitol Hill was during TARP. Okay, I saw the big banks get a lot of taxpayer money, and I saw my grandparents lose everything. All right, that hasn't been a winning message for young voters, and so we need to do a good job on educating about socialism, but it's got to be substantive, and I do think it's a big risk for us in this election.
Just to put a point under what she said, that we did come across this in our research. Think about this. If you're under age 35, socialism doesn't mean a thing to you. You have no experience with it. If you're under age 35, the Berlin Wall means nothing to you. So it's just, 9/11 means something to you. Berlin Wall means nothing to you. So one thing that's hopeful, though, when you ask people who identify positively to socialism, they don't know what it means. When you start asking them about it, they're against it.
Yeah.
Is Mark Lauder here? Mark, are you in the room?
You could save all these questions for him later.
Yeah, but I want to make sure. Okay, he'll be in the next meeting. Scott.
Scott Cooper, and this is a question for the two gentlemen in the middle. With the 2 to 3 races in California, what are your thoughts of the 7th Congressional District in Sacramento where Buzz Patterson is running? I believe that's a Democrat +3 race, and I'd like your thoughts. Thanks.
Well, the first thing I would say is that is a race that we're taking a look at. And that's because one of the lessons we learned in 2018 Trump does help bring out better candidates. In 2018, if you look at our candidates, they all looked the same. They all were pretty much white older men. This cycle, when you start getting into the candidates that we're starting to have, we have a tremendous amount of black, Hispanic, and particularly female candidates that are entering into the race. We have one of the most exciting lists of candidates, aggregate, that we've had in a long time. So I think that is going to help our chances dramatically. So that race that you're talking about, Sacramento, the Democrat +3, I actually think that might be softening a little bit based on some of these issues. For us, if it's a Democrat +5 district or below, we think it could be in play.
Yeah, we like that district, but we particularly like the 7 that went D, and we particularly like Orange County. Mm-hmm. It's obviously trending away from us. We basically lost here for 2 main reasons. Number one, we got completely out-hustled on ballot harvesting.
Yes, we did.
We won on election day in virtually every one of these districts, and then when the harvested ballots came in, we lost them all. And so our organization is going to be harvesting ballots in the churches. We're going to be specifically going in not only to white evangelical churches, but into Hispanic and Asian churches and collecting those ballots and holding them until the end, just like they did. That's number one. Number two is what Adam mentioned, which is the diversity of the candidates. In the 19 top races right now, 2 years ago, we had 1 woman out of those 19. Today, 14 of the 19 candidates are women. And it makes a big difference. And I'll mention one last thing. And again, I'm not trying to point fingers, but this is what happened. We had people who ran who never said they were Democrats, never said what they were for, wouldn't respond to a single candidate questionnaire, in many cases wouldn't even answer questions in debates. And we let them get away with it. And it was on us that we didn't call these people out. I live in one of these districts, Georgia 6, where Lucy McBath got up and said, I lost a son to gun violence. I'm running to save children. Okay, so it was all rainbows and unicorns, and it was personal bios. They never talked about issues, and our candidates let them get away with it. And we got to hit them high, we got to hit them hard, and we got to hit them early. And number one on that list, and Adam, I don't know if this backs up with your research or not, and Rasmussen's data, but the public opinion strategies data is irrefutable. If you go into these districts and you have a pro-impeachment identified Democrat running against an anti-impeachment Republican, those districts, the swing ones, they break 57 to 39 for the Republican candidate. So we need to hang impeachment around their necks in those districts.
One thing I just want that Ralph said, thank you for doing this. Ballot harvesting, I get calls every day. What are we going to do to stop ballot harvesting? Guys, it's too late. That ship has sailed, at least for the next 5 cycles. If we don't start figuring out how to do it on our own, can't beat them, join them. We need to start learning how to do it ourselves.
We're going to do a session on that.
Good.
There we go.
This weekend. And Floyd.
Ralph, my question is for you. I live in Arizona, where Mormons are a big part of the faith component.
Yeah.
They're a major constituency. Martha McSally lost her race because of an undervote in Mesa, Arizona, the second largest Mormon city in America. And she allowed her opponent, Kristen Sinema, to put on all of her brochures, educated at BYU, educated at BYU. I saw it on everything, educated at BYU, when she was an atheist, and an avowed atheist. So because of the problems President Trump has had with Mormons in particular, and in particular with Romney, what can we do? Are there any strategies we can use to reach out to Mormons proactively, especially in states like Arizona?
Absolutely. And we've done it in the past. We've done it in Arizona. And we need to do it again. And I can follow up with you and find out who we need to be talking to. But look, we have had a serious issue with the LDS community. And, Romney's part of it. The fact that Evan McMullen, who was Mormon, ran as an independent, that didn't help.
And he won Utah.
And candidly, in terms of, the president's personal style, it's not helpful. It affects Mormons in a way that it doesn't really affect evangelicals. I think evangelicals, I had a friend of mine who worked in the White House, and this is a very revealing story to me. This person came into the private study that the president works in that's off the Oval Office, and I can't remember what was going on at that moment, whether it was, Stormy Daniels or, Russia or whatever it was, but Trump was working away, and he looked up at this person who happens to be a deeply committed Christian, and he said, "Could you please explain to me why the evangelicals are sticking with me in the middle of all this?" And this person, I love this because I think they spoke truth to the president, and I think they also ministered to him. They said, "Mr. President, the reason why is because every one of them at some point in their lives was at the altar carrying some kind of baggage, some kind of sin, in many cases a deep, wounding, grievous sin, and they relied on the forgiveness and the grace of Jesus Christ. And now, having received it, they're extending it to you." And that, I think that's the story. And I don't mean this in any kind of a critical way. I just think it's a different way of thinking. In the LDS community, it's much more of a moral kind of standing question. Are you acting and behaving in a way that is moral? And I think that's problematic. But the reality is, and you know this if you live in Arizona, you can develop a ground game in these communities, in their temples and in their ministry networks that spreads the word and turns the vote out just like you can in any other community. It can and it must be done, particularly in that Senate race.
You were going to say something? Okay. Adam, did you and Jenny Beth make clear about the fact that when you put together that war room, it was because there was a lack of leadership in the White House necessarily.
Well, I'll tell you exactly.
Yeah.
And this is something that happens all the time. Is someone will say, there'll be an issue, and people will say, someone needs to do something. Someone needs to do something. And eventually you sit around in the room waiting for someone else to do something long enough, and it's like, gee, someone does need to do something. And if you put enough folks together who are committed, you can come up with a battle plan. But that's one of the main values I see that my organization gets out of all of this, is that there's different issues that we can all learn. You do this better, we do this better. Like, I would love to partner on ballot harvesting with you at some point. But you only get those partnerships when there's a chance for people to actually sit down and meet and build trust and understand each other. And that's some of the great value that I get here.
And that's what CNP does. It brings people here. Jenny Beth, please.
We actually started, well, I had the idea that we needed the war room before the last CNP meeting. And so during the board meeting, we talked about it, and Brent Bozell and Jim DeMint basically gave me their blessing to organize it. And I had already been in touch with FreedomWorks because we partnered together on almost everything. So the point is, it was an outshoot of the work that we do here at Council for National Policy, and the weekly organizing that we do for Conservative Action Project is how we were able to really build out the war room. So I just want to make sure everyone in this room knows that the messaging and the ability for all these groups from around the country to be on the same page and to help turn the tide on impeachment really started here.
And thank you for all of you willing to do this and to take the leadership. And we have reason to be encouraged. I mean, we're in a battle. And as you know, during World War II, we lost some battles, but we didn't surrender because we're in the overall war. And in this war, I think that we're going to succeed.
So who's going to break the news to Art Laffer that our panel was really
Definitely
awesome?
But just a couple more things that for Ralph mentioned, for example, the number of people that didn't turn out. Hillary knew the numbers that she paid for in Philadelphia and in Detroit and these places. And EW is there. David Barton and I, we did in the black churches, we explained as to what history was all about and what's going on. And in Detroit alone, there's an undervote. That is, the Secretary of State keeps track of the number of people that took ballots and showed up and voted. But then you always have, and usually the lead is the president or the governor, and from that everything else goes down to finally get down to judges and things, and the undervote can be rather high. The undervote in the city of Detroit in 2016, these were basically African-American Democrats that went and voted. 55,000 did not vote for president for either position, and he only won the state by 14,000. So had the undervote just been 40,000, we would have lost that. So by working in these communities and doing these things, it makes a difference. So every vote does count, and I appreciate what each one of you are doing. Just another quick reason to be happy. The Ninth Circuit is the appellate jurisdiction that just went off the rails. Anything crazy, just really absurd. Obama appointed 8 members of that panel. Donald Trump has appointed 10. And he's only been there 3 years, not 8. So they know what's coming down the pike at them. And 2016 was the most important election in my lifetime.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was 5-4 on everything. She appointed a couple more. The American that we know would have never existed. So that God reached in and said, "You guys are incompetent. I'm going to here." so fortunately, he did it. And while we're being scriptural here, if you remember, God took the children of Israel all the way up within a matter of weeks up to Israel, up to the Jordan. Yeah. And at that point, they thought, well, he's been doing good so far, but I need to check. I need some pollsters to go in and scout out the land a little bit to see whether or not he can do this. And they came back and said, we are as but grasshoppers in our own eyes. And God said, fine, you don't trust me? Did I not do this? Did I not protect you in the night, in the daylight? Did I not give you victory? And you don't trust me? Oh, we don't. We'll go. And they went in. They got whomped. And God said, exactly. Come with me. And for 40 years, they went out there till they were all gone. And it came back the second time, and Joshua said, we ain't taking any polls. You keep walking. You walk into the water, you walk into the Jordan, and we will occupy the land. and quite frankly, God saved us. He pulled us back. Now it's our responsibility to occupy the land. This time we must charge there is nothing in our lives that is more important than what these next 8 months are going to be. And the victories have been, this fella, I'm telling you, we've had good people, but this president is unbelievable. Let me give you an example. Planned Parenthood. I'm watching the time. Planned Parenthood.
Remember, we gave you tomorrow night.
Only 10 minutes tomorrow. Let me tell you, remember what Planned Parenthood is. Most people don't know what Planned Parenthood does. Planned Parenthood only performs abortions. What it does, it takes abortionists, people that would never hang it on a shingle, and it contracts with them, and then they fly them to some Iowa or Idaho or someplace else where nobody could get an abortion. And they fly them in there, and they perform these abortions, and they make lots and lots of money in the process. And they used to fly them first class, but now they fly them in private jets. They had a $136 million carryover last year. They're in the business of only performing abortions and they need no money from us. It's just a spiritual thing to obligate our entire country by taking budget. They're not entitled to our budget, but nevertheless, the liberals keep doing that. And seemingly, no matter who we elect, they can never quite get it done until this president did this. Planned Parenthood understood that saying that you perform abortions is not a good selling point. So they said they care for women. They have women caring. And so they had their consultants say, look at all the things that they do. Well, what do? When you come in, they take your blood pressure, and they take your heart rate. And then when they draw the blood, then they put a Band-Aid. And they listed all these things, 26 things that they do for women. And of course, it's all related to only one thing, abortion. They used to say they had mammograms, till finally some Republicans got up the brains to ask them, how many mammograms has Planned Parenthood performed? And they had to admit 0, because they have no machines or anything. So here's what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump said, I tell you what, Planned Parenthood, you're doing those wonderful health care things for women. That's just terrific. You continue to do that. But there's one restriction. You can't perform abortions in the same facility where you perform these wonderful benefits for women. And this year, Planned Parenthood told HHS, we are taking no money because they can't do it. So.
I was in a meeting we were meeting with Barry McGuire as an executive committee member, and he said, this is spiritual warfare at bottom, and it is. And aren't we proud of these 4 people? Art Laffer's an old friend, but I'm not going to tell him exactly what happened here. Anyway, thank you. This is great. And,
thanks so much.
Onward, and we've got another interesting panel coming up, a couple of them this afternoon. And at noon, we're going to go across the hall and meet in the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom, salons 1 through 4. And we'll see you then. See you there. Great.